Hello, friends. I am Shelley Clough, and today is day 7 of our 12 Days of Watercolor Christmas cards. And today we have this fun Christmas cookie design that we are going to paint. So let's dive in. For my paper today, I'm just using some Canson XL watercolor paper that I have trimmed and scored, and I will link the tools I used for that below. You can also purchase pre-cut watercolor cards, but I just like to trim mine down because I already have everything I need for that. So I'm just going to tape my paper down, and again, I'm just being mindful of where my design's going to go. So I'm going to tape a little bit over to the side on this top corner and kind of in the same area on the bottom here. And I'm going to do one more little piece kind of in this region here. Okay, so for paints today, I'm using what I call my starter palette. I have the swatch card for this linked below if you want to know what the colors are and how I lay them out. And for a brush today, I'm going to start out with this size 6 by Princeton Neptune. And we are going to use, this is a little cookie cutter shape. So it's a little tiny star cookie cutter shape. And that's what we're going to use to make our cookies. And I'm going to start by mixing up a brown color for that. So for my brown, I want this to be kind of more of a sugar cookie color than a gingerbread cookie color, like our house the other day. So I am mixing burnt sienna and then some yellow ochre. So it's taking this a little bit lighter of a brown than the gingerbread brown. So I'm just mixing up kind of a medium tone of that, and then just dabbing off my brush a couple times so it's not too loaded with liquid. This star shape does not actually, it doesn't adhere well to the paint when I tap it in, and I actually find it a little bit easier to place this on my paper and then trace on the inside. And it might be a little hard for you to see because I have to kind of crowd my angles, so you may not be able to see well, but hopefully you'll be able to understand what I'm doing. So I'm going to start with one star kind of right here. I press it down nice and tight on my paper and then take my brush and just sort of capture all of the edges of each point of the star. Just make sure that it's tight down whenever I press my brush in there. And my last one here. And then I lift, and that's kind of what it looks like. And then I can sort of clean up any points. And then I'm just going to sort of wet this whole area, but keep that inner portion a little bit lighter than the edges. Just cleaning up the points of our star. And because these are cookies, it's okay if they're not perfect, because you know how cookies are in the oven. They just spread out and they're never exactly the shape of the cookie cutter. And then I'm just taking a little extra of that color and sort of running it along the edge here to get sort of that brown, crispy look on the edge of our cookies. So just a light little line around the edge. And now we can do another one. So for my star number 2, I think I'm going to come kind of right here, holding that cookie cutter down nice and tight, and then coating those inside points. Okay. And then again, sometimes I'll just clean up if there's any parts that didn't quite get caught, and then fill in that middle section. And I try to just give my brush kind of a rinse and a dab if it's not lifting the color very well, just so that the inner portion is not too pigmented, because we're going to paint some frosting over that. So I don't want it to be super dark in the middle. And then just taking some more of that paint color and kind of running it along the perimeter. I don't know if any of you know the George Strait song, Christmas Cookies, but I have had that song stuck in my head for the last couple of days for some reason. And I thought, oh, I should find a way to paint some Christmas cookies. And that's what inspired these cookies here. Okay, we've got another one. I'm just trying to like alternate the points a little bit so they look like they're all spread out. Do one right over here, way on the edge. Lifting it up, and then I can fill it in. I'll go over those edges first, and then rinse my brush off. give it a little dab on my paper towel, and then rub that inside. So it's nice and smooth, but that the color has been softened on that inner portion of the cookie. All right, and now I like to do two more. This one I'm going to do down here, sort of falling off the page a little bit. And we're just going to repeat the process. Mix up a little more color. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush and fill that in. And then just restoring a little color to those edges where it's fading just a little bit. That color along the edges helps these cookies to look a little bit three-dimensional. So they look like they're on top of the paper. Okay, and now I'm going to do one more kind of up here. You can decide where you want to place it. I'll do about right here. Lift that off, and now we're all done with that. I'm going to just rinse and dab my brush and smooth out that inner portion. And then go around that perimeter with a little bit more brown. You can also switch to a slightly smaller brush for this step if it's difficult to get that kind of thinnish line or to have the control you need with the larger brush. Okay, so now that I've got all my cookies on there, I'm going to put some frosting on them. So I thought, what better frosting colors than red and green? And so I'm going to start with some red cookies here. I'm just mixing cadmium red with a little bit of alizarin crimson. And then I am going to, I'm going to kind of go in the same order that I put the stars down first, because these ones are dry now. These two are dry at least. And I'm just going to put that frosting, I'm going to do sort of a little perimeter around the brown. So I'm just sort of following the line that's already been created by the cookie cutter, and just leaving a little perimeter for the frosting. And then I'm going to fill that in. And I'm just going to tap a little extra color again around the edge of that, a little bit of a darker red, just so that it's not a perfectly even color. I want it to be a little bit uneven so that it looks kind of textured, and it'll make it look a little more realistic. When it's all flat, it ends up looking a little bit more like clip art, like it's 2D, and when there's some texture in there, it helps it look 3D. So I'm going to do 3 red stars. I'm going to do these 3 all red, and then these 2 green. Of course, you can decide whatever you would like. So I'm going to, let's see. I'm just going to run my dryer over the rest of these, make sure that they are all dry, and so that I can go in and do all the red at once. Okay, so those are dry now. I can go ahead and add my red frosting to the rest of them and just copying that same process. Kind of outlining, following the outline that the cookie cutter made. Okay, and then just taking a little bit of a more pigmented color, a little bit more alizarin crimson, and kind of running that just along the edge to help with that dimension. And then just like a couple little speckles in the middle there. And then I'm going to come up here and do this one. This one it's maybe a little bit more complicated. Like you have to be a little more careful with some of the steps, but there's a lot of repetition. So you have a lot of chances to practice and sort of get it right. And hopefully this is a doable tutorial for you. And you learn lots of really fun kind of fundamentals with this one too, which I always like. Okay, so this one, I feel like it's drying a little funny. I'm going to rinse my brush, dab it on my paper towel, and just sort of gently massage some of that color so that it's a little bit more even as it dries. So I do want some of that texture in there. I just don't want it to be quite so harsh. Okay, so now I'm going to do my green. And for my green, I feel like the perfect sort of Christmas green color, we're going to do Viridian green, and then we're going to add in some cadmium yellow. So if I come over here to cad yellow, mix that together, it's sort of that really crisp, kind of like a Kelly green. Seems perfect for some frosting. So now I'm going to go ahead and do that same process on this next star. And you'll notice when I'm doing the points on these, I try to make sure they're not super pointy, but a little bit rounded, because that's kind of how they end up looking once they're baked. And then just a little extra color along the edges. Okay, and then my last one. And just some little drops of color kind of in the middle there. Give that some texture too. All right, look how cute they're looking. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start creating some more of a 3D effect with these cookies. And so one of the ways we're going to do that is adding a shadow around one edge of the cookies. And I'm going to do that with some Payne's Gray. Scoop my palette here. Payne's Gray with a pretty good amount of water. You want it to be pretty light so it's not really stark. And I would start extra light. You can always deepen it. But if you start too dark, it'll look kind of funny. So I've got kind of a light tone of Payne's Gray there. And what I'm going to do is just take, I've switched to a size 4 Da Vinci brush now, so I can make really fine line. I'm just going to follow right on the outside of this edge of the cookie, kind of like this. Tapping a little extra color right there by the top. And then I'm going to give my brush a good rinse and a dab, and then just kind of run that over the very edge of that color to diffuse the shadow a bit. All right, so it's almost like our sunlight is coming from this way, and so the shadow is on this side of the cookie. So wherever you place your shadow, just make sure it's consistent between all the cookies. And so I'm going to do that on this one, and then just sort of dab it off and soften that edge. And then over here, go all around this side here. And then I'm gonna rinse and soften that edge. Just diffuses that shadow out. And if you're struggling to diffuse the shadow, it could be that it's just a timing thing. Sometimes as the paper starts to dry, it gets a little harder to diffuse, but you can just sort of scrub your brush at it for a minute and it will loosen up and you can still soften it. Okay, come over here. Okay, do you see how those are kind of starting to lift off the page a little bit? And I made this one, feels like it's faded a little. I'm just gonna tap a little extra. And you can kind of build up any of those that feel like they're not quite dark enough. And it doesn't have to be perfectly consistent on the whole thing. So I'm doing a little deeper shadow right there in the bend. Okay, now that I've done that, I am going to, let's see here. If your frosting is dry, then we can add our sprinkles. So the sprinkles are a really fun part. I'm just going to run my dryer over this and make sure that the frosting is 100% dry, and then we'll add some sprinkles. Okay, so for my sprinkles, I'm going to be using this bleed proof white, and I will have that linked below as well. It's just like a really thick, I feel like it will work better than gouache for these sprinkles because I want them to be totally opaque. And my trick for making perfect circles for our sprinkles, so remember, this is what our sprinkles look like. My trick for making the circles perfect is I'm actually just going to keep using that same size 4 brush and use the handle and just dip the handle into this white and then use that like a little dabber. And I can usually do 2 or 3 or 4 little sprinkles with one dip. Look how fun. And I tried to make some a little bit bigger and some a little bit smaller. So like using kind of a lighter dab or a heavier dab so that there's a little bit of variation in the sprinkles. I just think that's kind of fun. And then I just try to be as kind of random while I put those down so that they don't look too perfect. All right, I think those are looking pretty cute. Just going to close up my white, and then the end of your brush will just wipe off really easy. You can dip it in your water and wipe it off, and it is as good as new. So that's a fun little tip for you. Okay, now I'll show you one more little detail that you can add if you want to. At this point, it is unnecessary, but it may help, especially if you feel like your cookies are still lacking a little bit of dimension. You can do this. So I'm just taking a little bit of burnt umber this time, which is a little bit darker brown, and mixing that with that brown I used before. Just using my size 4 brush so I can be really precise. And then just making a really light, almost a like a broken line around the edge of some of these cookies. So it sort of emphasizes the shadow point and helps kind of that shape pop back out. And I'm painting on the brown that I already painted. So I'm not going over every single part of my cookie, just most of it. There's our cute little Christmas cookies. I just think they are so fun. I am going to let this dry all the way, and then I'll add my little stamp on the back. All right, so that is all dry. I am just going to flip it over and grab my stamp. This is just my Handmade by Shelley Clough Art stamp, and I'm going to add that onto the back. If you want a custom stamp like this, I have one linked below that you can use, and then I also have a template that I created. So if you want to have an easy way to kind of plug your name into a design like this, I have that linked below as well. Okay, look how cute. I love these little cookies. I hope you had fun with this tutorial. Thanks so much for watching with me. I hope you are subscribed to the channel so that you can catch the rest of these Christmas card videos, and we will see you all in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.